With this invocation, I would like to welcome all of you to this conference, Strengthening Democracy in Asia, Participation, Inclusion, Rights, organized by Institute of Social Sciences, ADN, Asia Democracy Network, and World Movement for Democracy. This morning, we are blessed to have amongst us His Holiness the Dalai Lama, a symbol of compassion, peace, love, and freedom. May I now invite Dr. George Matthew, Chairman, Institute of Social Sciences, to give the welcome address. And before we start, the mic is... And before we start, I would like to request all the participants present here to kindly request your mobiles. Thank you.
His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Carl Gershman, Sikyong, Lobsang Sangay, distinguished participants, colleagues. First of all, let me extend you all a very warm welcome to this program. Today is a special day for all of us as we are remembering the legacy of an outstanding leader who fought for the rights of laborers from his native town of Mangalore in the state of Karnataka and rose to national and international esteem. Along with his followers and friends from India, there are his friends and admirers from 20 countries here with us today. When George Fernandez became unwell, many friends were keen to organize an event in the national capital to remember George's legacy. Everyone wanted His Holiness to be the chief guest of this program. And our dear friend Temba Sering conveyed this message to His Holiness, and he gave March 23rd as the date for this celebration of his legacy. Friends, when His Holiness touches anything, everything, including a date, it has enormous significance. What is March 23? March 23 is the martyrdom day of Sharad Bhagat Singh, the national hero of India for independence movement. March 23rd is the birthday of the outstanding socialist leader in the country, Ram Manohar Lohia. And March 23 is the day when the political emergency in this country, the black spot in the democracy history of India, was lifted, and that is March 23. His Holiness, and we have wonderful memories of his association with us. On 19 November 2010, he unveiled the portrait of George Fernandez drawn by Mr. Seat 9I, Burmese artist. And he gave on that occasion the Silver Jubilee lecture. What was the topic? Human approach to world peace. An outstanding lecture on that occasion when he unveiled this portrait. And when I mentioned this, he was so happy, and I am very, very happy that he is with us. Friends, let us give a warm welcome to His Holiness. Carl Gershman is a dear friend of George for so many years, and very closely associated with the work of democracy all over the world. Many of you may remember it was in 1999 the World Movement for Democracy was inaugurated, and where? It was in New Delhi. And the keynote speaker was Amartya Sen. From that day onwards, I am closely associated with Carl. And when I shared the idea of celebrating George's legacy, he readily supported me and mobilized such a wide international support for this program. I am extremely grateful to Carl. Because of this, the whole concept of this international conference on strengthening democracy in Asia, participation, inclusion, and rights has been woven around the legacy of George Fernandez. Let us give a warm welcome to Carl Gershman. Sikyong Lobsang Sangay is the political leader of the Central Tibetan administration. Even though the Tibetan parliament is in session this week, I am very pleased that Sikyong took the time out to join us today. Thank you very much, and let us give a warm welcome to Sikyong Lobsang Sangay. Our institute was started 30 years ago. When I told George in 1984 about establishing an institution where intellectuals and activists can meet, he readily encouraged me. Since then, all these years, George has been a friend, philosopher, and guide of the institute. And remembering his great service to the people of this country, we have begun this occasion, and it will continue for generations to come. Friends, very briefly, for those who are new to this area, let me say a few words about George. George Fernandez, eldest of 6 children, was born on June 3, 1930. After completing his high school from St. Aloysius School in Mangalore, he was sent to Bangalore in 1946 to be trained as a priest. He left the seminary and began to work organizing exploited workers in the road transport industry and in the hotels and restaurants in Mangalore. In 1949, George moved to Bombay. He had to sleep on the streets of Bombay until he got a job as a proofreader in a newspaper. Then he came in contact with the trade unionists and socialist leaders, especially Ram Manohar Lohia. He rose to prominence as a trade unionist and fought for the rights of laborers. and became a central figure in the unionization of sections of Bombay, dock workers and others, and many workers' strikes were organized by George in the 1950s and the 60s. George was first elected to Parliament in 1967 from Bombay. As president of the All India Railwaymen's Federation, he led the railway strike involving 1.5 million workers in 1974, resulting in thousands of people being sent to jail. George went underground, challenging the political emergency. In 1976, he was arrested. Being in prison was nothing new to George. And in 1977, when the emergency was lifted, he was elected from Bihar and became the member of parliament and union minister for industries. Celebrating the 60th year, VP Singh, former Prime Minister of India, released 3 volumes under the general title Dignity for All. Dignity for All. That was on 12th April 1991. George was 9 times member of parliament and held several ministerial portfolios, including communications, industry, railways, and defense. He had the courage of conviction, and his fighting spirit stood him in good stead. George Fernandez made extraordinary impact on Indian politics, society, and the international political scene. Having acquired a proficiency in 10 languages, George is also literally gifted and has published numerous books. Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you all to this extraordinary international conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Matthew. These were really passionate words, I must say. And now may I like to invite Dr. Anselmo Lee, co-convener, Asia Democracy Network, champion of human rights and development and democracy. Dr. Anselmo Lee, please.
His Holiness Dalai Lama, Your Excellencies, friends, and democracy advocates from Asia and all over the world, I'm extremely happy to be here today to welcome you as one of the co-organizers of this conference. As you see in the banner, ADN, Asia Democracy Network, is one of the co-organizers. I'm from Korea. My name is Anselmo Lee. Korea, as you know, divided country, but hopefully it will be united soon. We don't know how soon. With your support, it will be very soon. I don't know personally George Fernandez, but I learned from many friends here since yesterday, the last year, when we began to organize this meeting. I was very impressed. For me, it was George Matthew, not George Fernandez. I was in the beginning very confused between George Matthew and George Fernandez. So now it's very clear. They are the 2 important persons for democracy, not only in India or Asia. And also, I'm very happy for this opportunity because ADN, Asia Democracy Network, the first time we are having meeting in India and South Asia. We used to have a meeting in Seoul. ADN was created October 2013, and then we had a meeting in Singapore and Bangkok and Taipei. Now we are in South Asia. So I'm extremely happy about this opportunity to strengthen the democracy not only South Asia and also whole Asia together. As you may know, there is a brochure outside. The motto of ADN is defending and promoting democracy together. One of our key values is democracy is universally recognized value. It's not Western value, it's our own valuation. So main spirit of ADN is to create a democracy, strengthen democracy among Asians in partnership with the global community who share the same values. George mentioned about 23rd of March in Indian context, but I want to broaden the context of 2015, not only 23rd of March. As you may know, 2015 is 800th anniversary of Magna Carta, as we discussed yesterday during our steering committee meeting. So human rights goes back to 800 years. Of course, in Asian history, even go back to more than 1,000 years. Second, also 70th anniversary of end of World War II, which means foundation of United Nations, and also which means liberation of many Asian countries around that time, South Korea, India, Indonesia, many countries in Asia, which means also beginning of nation building, if not national democracy. So I think it's very symbolic. It is time for us to revisit 70 years history of nation building from the democracy perspective. And one more, 2015, for development community, it is time of paradigm shift. As you may know, MDG, Millennium Development Goal, which was created year 2000, is coming to an end. And then international community around the UN, now we are discussing the new goal, temporarily known as SDG, Sustainable Development Goals. So we are having this conference in this historical context, human rights, development, and democracy. I hope we can deepen our reflection on this strengthening democracy in Asia, inclusion, participation, and right in this historical context. And one more, I think the theme is very relevant for ADN and also many democracy advocates in Asia today, because inclusion, participation, right are three core values and guiding principles of democracy movement in Asia, especially the right, which means human rights-based approach. So once again, I want to stress the importance of combining democracy, human rights, and development, which are the main domain of democracy challenges today. And lastly, I would like to thank, of course, the NED and also Swedish government to support this initiative, which is very important for us. And also, especially, I'm extremely happy to discuss democracy in the presence of His Holiness Dalai Lama, because yesterday also we discussed democracy and religion. Today, religion provides good opportunities, at the same time, huge challenges to democracy in Asia. Various forms of religious extremism and also fundamentalism, how to address those challenges, I think it's a very important emerging challenges. I hope coming 2 days, we can bring our experiences and wisdom together to come up with a very concrete, action-oriented plan for coming years. Once again, warm welcome, and also enjoy today's conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Lee, for those valuable words. Now may I invite Ms. Melinda Quinto de Jesus, former steering committee member, World Movement for Democracy, and founding member, ADN.
His Holiness, Excellencies, honored guests, friends, ladies and gentlemen, it is in behalf of the World Movement for Democracy that I welcome you to this gathering of kindred spirits. I am proud to have spent 8 years as a member of the steering committee of the WMD, ending my last term in 2012, as my colleagues and I, coming from different parts of the world, welcomed the dramatic changes in Myanmar, even as we saw the gains of the Arab Spring challenged by conflict and division. Democratic practice calls for patience and persistence. It is never easy. The fragile steps taken towards people's freedom and self-rule are only the first steps in a long journey. Even older democracies are confronted by the need to review and to renew their own democracies. Thus, the World Movement for Democracy has its work cut out for its members. With a hard-working secretariat housed by the National Endowment of Democracy in Washington, D.C., the movement is brought to life around the world by its diverse participants. Since 1999, it had convened biennial global assemblies in different parts of the world to present the latest studies and results of research, share experiences of democratic gains as well as crisis, discuss the learning drawn from advocacies and campaigns on various issues. Practitioners, scholars, policymakers, journalists like myself, and funders dedicated to the advancement of democracy have deepened the understanding of the growth in the different kinds of soil where the seeds of freedom and equality are planted. At every stage, activists work to wear down dictators, open up closed societies and authoritarian systems, consolidate emerging democracies, and reform and restore both old and new. Cross-border solidarity grows learning about critical issues, making elections not just free and fair, but also the need to provide meaningful choices for national leaders. The protection not only of human rights, but of its defenders. Countering the culture of impunity, and not the least, the issues of women and of peace. Before the end of my term, the World Movement for Democracy brought together Asian champions to form our own Asian Democracy Network, something that highlights the idea that the 21st century will be Asia's to claim. Someone had described the WMD as a huge movable tent for democracy as principle and practice. But with my own personal experience in that tent, I have expanded that image. It is a welcoming canopy, a sheltering sky for all who can contribute and all who believe that there is much to learn from counterparts who have triumphed in the struggle, as well as those who have suffered the test and trial of the journey. It is good to have this conference in India, which represents a vigorous model of democracy in Asia. Once again, welcome and thank you for your presence.
Truly inspirational, ma'am. It was really inspirational. And now I would like to invite Mr. Carl Greshman, President, National Endowment for Democracy, longtime activist and supporter of human rights and democracy worldwide. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. And welcome to all of you this morning. I want to pay a special welcome to Ambassador Chung Kwan Tien from Taiwan. And a very special welcome we have with us this morning three of George Fernandez's four brothers, Paul, Michael, and Louis. Please stand up. This conference was originally planned with our friend George Matthew on the theme of the legacy of George Fernandez, which is a legacy of impassioned struggle for political freedom and social and economic justice. George, as you've heard, was a trade unionist, a brilliant orator, an impassioned and committed socialist leader who when the emergency was declared in 1975, he went underground to lead the struggle for the restoration of democracy, and then he was arrested on June 10th, 1976. When, after the emergency, and George emerged and became Minister of Communications and later Minister of Industry, he said something that I think defined his philosophy. Those of us, he said, who had the honor and the privilege of fighting for what we believed was right and against what we knew was wrong, hold the view that what we went through was a struggle between truth and falsehood, between justice and injustice, between democracy and dictatorship. As we planned this meeting, the idea of the conference evolved from a tribute to George into a discussion of ways to strengthen democracy throughout Asia. And this is consistent with George's record as a great democratic internationalist. He benefited from the solidarity of others. And when he was arrested, immediately after he was arrested, three great socialist leaders, Willy Brandt, Olof Palme, and Bruno Kreisky, issued a statement which George felt saved his life. And so George was somebody who not only benefited from international solidarity, but he never hesitated to give international solidarity to others. His home, when he was defense minister between 1998 and 2004, and beyond that, but his home, even at that time, was the headquarters of a Burmese student exile movement that was fighting for democracy. As defense minister, his home was the headquarters for the Burmese exile student movement. And he was India's best friend of the Dalai Lama and its strongest advocate for the human, religious, and national rights of the Tibetan people. I'll never forget when we organized the founding assembly of the World Movement for Democracy here in India, and the Indian government wavered on whether or not to give its consent to His Holiness speaking at the opening of the World Movement for Democracy. George was very, very angry, and he fought within his government to get them to change their position on whether or not the Dalai Lama could speak at the World Movement. And then he came himself and delivered an impassioned speech, I remember that, where he not only talked about Asia, he talked about the Slansky trials in Czechoslovakia in 1952. He was really a great internationalist. And there is no one, I think, in the world who more appreciates George Fernandez and his struggle than His Holiness the Dalai Lama. When we were standing outside before and His Holiness met George's three brothers, he said, well, you're, his real brothers, his physical brothers, but I am his spiritual brother. So it's really an extraordinary pleasure and a privilege for me now to introduce this great voice for world harmony and human freedom, His Holiness the Dalai Lama.
Respected elder brothers and rest of brothers and sisters. The brothers and sisters who gathered here, I think some special brothers and sisters, you committed not only your own sort of well-being, but you see, taking the care of millions of other people. So I really appreciate your feeling, and then also more important, you committed these sort of ideas. But it is quite easy. You say very nice thing, but doing nothing. That quite often you see happen. But I think you see people here, I think you really committed yourself. Then on special also the occasion, the George Fernandez, long time my friend. I'm one of admirer of him. I remember during his also he as a defense minister, one occasion, he invited his own residents. I think you were there. So we had lunch. Then after lunch, I enter his toilet. So some clothes or some sheets. You see, to wash. You see, piling there. Then I felt, you see, as a socialist, I think it seems to see he managed his own home, you see, by himself. So I don't know. I think you know better. So anyway, as a such person, again, as I mentioned earlier, he actually dedicate what he believed, no matter how difficult it is. So I really admire. And then beside that, he also very, very sort of say sympathetic, or not only sympathetic, but he often, you see, mention about our difficulties, like that. So I feel till my death, his face always very close in my heart. As a Buddhist, our unique sort of, very special sort of friendship, you see, may carry even next life. When I say my next life, in deep and the deep sort of my mind, maybe remember him. So then during emergency, some problem, and also Jayaprakash Narayan, his physical, I think, much worsened, physical condition much worsened. That period, soon after, so they changed the situation. I call him a partner, his own home. Then his physical, very bad. I think that's the last meeting. Again, one great sort of leader of this country. Soon after 59, I came, he organized Afro-Asian Conference. This is regarding, you see, our problem. So then about democracy. I think firstly, I mentioned when I meet some of the Indian friends, many occasions, I mentioned, although India already got independence, but still India need this certain sort of, how to say, determination and self-confidence and fearlessness. You see, that still need in this country. So he, one of them, really wonderful. You see, sometimes, as I mentioned earlier, you see, sometimes the people get some high position. Then they are a little bit changed. That also I noticed, you see, some my friend, you see, during their Kasoda, with position, and something, a very dignified person, after retired, doesn't mean like that. But same human being. So you see, sometimes you see power and so also the position easily spoil. He not like that, I feel. So then I think democracy, I really believe. Even animal loves freedom. Sometimes I have small dogs and also one cat. So when door open, they happily run. So they also loves freedom, isn't it? Even though in the room we're feeding quite well, but still they do not satisfy. As soon as the opportunity comes, they run and play. And some you see, dogs, you see, in the grass, you see, doing like that. So that shows even animal appreciate freedom. So then we are human being. Besides sensorial or the experiences, our experience in mental level is much, much stronger than animal. Animal, you see, I think mainly use sensorial or say because of the experience for their survival. But we human beings, the mental thing become much more sort of because of the important. So I think different because of the differences rare. Differences the sentient being who use mental sort of capacity that I think we can call as a human being. So then, in order to utilize fully about human creativity nature, freedom very important. So now when I enter here, you see, hardly no African people or Arab. I think in the future, I think such meeting, I think we should invite some people from Africa. They're a very huge continent, great potential. I often you see expressing, when I met some African, because the person there, Africa, such a huge continent, and huge sort of say the potential. And then you see the present sort of situation, I think very sad. So many small countries and fighting, and within the country, again fighting. And these quarrel is carried by, suppose, those educated people. The people in the countryside, their real sort of effort is struggle for their daily survival. These are human beings. And then someone, you see, told, now the religious faith now causing problem. So these things You see, I usually, because of the call or express these terrorists as brothers, sisters. We should not, put them something far. No, must bring closer. Then through understanding, I think firstly, the personal sort of contact, friendship, and through that way, we can develop trust. And with trust, we can touch these critical, serious matter. Serious matter never solved by distrust. And use force, totally wrong method. I often used to telling, I love Mr. Bush. Since my first meeting, we immediately become close feeling. No formality. He really shows. Besides as a president, he immediately shows as a genuine human being. Some other sort of president, sometimes when I first met, a second meeting, third meeting, still they emphasize more on president. Little distance. No use. Still president, even president or king or queen or spiritual leaders, still human being. The number one, we are human being. On that level, no differences. As a matter of fact, I think today's a lot of problems which we are facing, with too much emphasis on secondary level of differences, including religious faith and nationality and color. In India, I think the caste system, I think the greatest obstacle is to promote genuine democracy, equality. I think that's quite serious. I think Buddha Shakyamuni, 2,600 years ago, you see, he specially emphasized against caste system. So even Chairman Mao Zedong, 1950, 54, 55, when I was in Peking, so one time Chairman Mao Zedong told me he considered Buddha Shakyamuni was revolutionary. Reason, you see, he totally sort of against caste system. That I think we can consider. You mentioned 800 years ago something. No? So I think 2,600 years ago is one Indian truly committed the equality and against these because of the discrimination. So usually I describe Buddha Shakyamuni was one aspect, great thinker and great philosopher. And one aspect, I usually describe scientist, ancient scientist. Although this is not purpose, you see, some kind of because of the or teaching of Buddhism, no. Now, okay, full stop, finished. So therefore, so the democracy to human being is very essential. This not only give freedom individual, but humanity. So as they further progress, the individual creativity nature must utilize fully. So in that respect, I think democracy, freedom, equality, these are very essential. And then I always say, telling people, world belongs to 7 billion human beings. 7 billion human beings are real owner of the world. Then each country 가서 the sentence about Mr. Bush. You see, as a human being, wonderful. So as far as his policy is concerned, sometimes a little difficult. So one occasion, after Iraq crisis happened, one occasion meeting, then I told him, I love you, I respect you, but some of your policy is concerned, I have great reservation. Then he laughed. So this is the full sentence, okay. So therefore, the democracy is, I think, the concern of humanity, not just one country or one continent. Therefore, each country belongs to the people, not a few individual kings or rajas or spiritual leaders. Sometimes I really feel the Bolshevik revolution actually against the Russian, the Tsars, strict control. So against that. Unfortunately, eventually Lenin himself became like that. And then, as well as the Chinese Communist Revolution, I think against the emperor's sort of extreme power, right? Absolute power, right? Then warlords, these things. Eventually, they themselves become like warlord. So I think these things, you see, the worldwide movement, democracy movement, very essential. So as I mentioned earlier, you see, we should include some African people, some Arab people, then our sort of meeting, our gathering, eventually can cover whole world. That's, I think, very important. The movement of democracy is not concerned one continent or one nation. And this is because of the matter of humanity. Then this is our approach, not something, you see, try to or against someone. No. You see, we also, you see, we must keep the sincere concern of these totalitarian sort of people, right? Well, ultimately they will suffer. So sometimes they may feel a little difficult to change. Then our effort, you see, may help them so to reduce sort of strict, sort of strict control. I think so. We have plenty of reason to explain the totalitarian sort of system. Not much reason, short-sighted interest. Democracy, for humanity, for a long future. So we have plenty of sort of reasons to explain. So I think real change, human mind, is an explanation. Use reasons, not by force. Reason with respect, genuine compassion, genuine sense of concern of their well-being. This is my belief. Whether right or wrong, you should judge. So, thank you. That's all. Thank you.
I'm going to just pose the first question to His Holiness. And I want to pick up on the idea that he was talking about at the end about democracy and totalitarianism. And I want to speak about India and China. These two great countries, the largest countries in the world. And India is the most diverse country in the world, ethnically, religiously, linguistically, and yet it has managed to hold together as a democracy. And Tibet finds itself between these two countries. Might you speak with us for a moment about how these two countries represent two ideas and how this might play out for the future of the world?
India, most populated democratic country. And because of, you see that, I think because of democracy and rule of law, although some pockets here and there, some drawbacks there, but basically, you see, the complete freedom of media and rule of law and democracy, I think because of that, this country, as you mentioned, in spite some because of the difficult situation, but this country, most stable country, compare neighboring states. Of course, in some extent, I think individual leaders also used to make some differences, but basically the system, democratic system,
Correct.
and the constitution based on secularism, these are really produce good result. Then China, I think communist totalitarian sort of system in European continent in early 20th century, around I think 1917, around that, you see that sort of country, you see a system with totalitarian communist system, you see developed. But within same century, that changed. That change not by outside force, but people themselves. Now China, People's Republic of China, one way after the Deng Xiaoping sort of as the leadership, you see, he realized China remain isolated, not good for interest for People's Republic of China. So you see, he opened a close relation with outside world. So that I think also the economy was the liberal way. Economy was the more openness, the economic field. It really helps a lot of millions of Chinese. I think the difficult sort of economic situation now much improved. Still, over I think 1.45 billions of populated nation. The economy very important. Now today, some problems. So that I'm not economist, I'm not expert, but some people say, unless political system, some change, this kind of difficulties will remain. So great nation, China, now most populated nation on this earth, and Chinese people, I usually see describing Han people are hard-working. Sometimes I think we hear 1.2 billion of Indian. Sometimes in the heat, relax. Han people more hard-working and really we can say 5,000-year-old cultural heritage. So I don't think this kind of, in a way, I think inhuman system, eventually Chinese people will accept. So like Liu Xiaobo, these people already sort of express. Because of fear, many people remain silent. But inside, now I notice many party member, outwardly party member, inside something different. So such a great nation, you can't survive that way. You have to become more realistic. So the political system, democratic, open society, is the only way, future of China. So, like my sort of friend, at this moment, your contribution may not be very significant, but please carry continuously. And eventually, I think the sensible over 1 billion Chinese brothers, sisters, I think they really want some change. Within the country, difficult to express publicly. So from outside. And then one advantage, now thousands Chinese students now sending Europe, America, and sometimes I also suggested to some of my Indian friends, now India also should welcome more Chinese students.
Sure.
And then one sort of particular case, India is all Buddhist, important Buddhist sites within this country. So like Muslim brothers, sisters who go to Mecca,
Yes.
there are some special arrangement. And also pilgrim to Mount Kailash, also some special arrangement. So similarly, you should provide some special arrangement. The millions of Chinese Buddhists who want to take pilgrim in this country. So through that way, they closer feeling. Sometimes leaders, I think like former Soviet Union, when my first visit there, 1979, I noticed the Soviet people, the government, I think deliberately create some kind of impression. Unless Soviet ready militarily, West going to attack them. Then I know, 1973, I already visited Europe. There I found many people in Europe, they would fear. Unless something prepare, Soviet may attack, or Warsaw Pact may attack. So in Soviet Union, the opposite sort of impression. So these, and then the construction of a Berlin Wall, these things, out of fear, I think in deep inside, lack of self-confidence. So in any way, not too much. Too much. These things. So therefore, as I mentioned earlier, the close contact. So India, I think, should India should let know millions of Chinese Buddhists and Chinese students about India's. Sometimes some tourists, few days, or few weeks, and then I think they may get the impression, the complete freedom of India's cow. on the street. Like one time, I remember the Tintin's Kasade. The comet, I think very beautifully, mentioned that captain or something, his car crashed one cow. Like that. So there are some little bit sort of careless things there. But if they spend more time, then they will realize India's freedom, India's democracy, So that's very important. I feel that. So eventually, I think, and then once, you see, develop more familiar feeling each other, and trust come, then this border issue, these things easily can solve. So long some distrust there, even small things, then create more difficult. That's my view.
His Holiness, thank you so much for remembering Liu Xiaobo. I mean, I hope that we'll welcome Liu Xiaobo to a conference of the Asia Democracy Network and the World Movement for Democracy before too long, and he should know that he's not alone. Thank you very much for remembering. We have time for other questions. If somebody wants to raise a question, I see a hand in the back. Please, yes. And say who you are and where you're from. I think His Holiness would like to know, and you'll get a microphone.
My name is Tenzin Pinsok, and I represent the National Democratic Party of Tibet as its General Secretary. I have only one question for His Holiness. How can religion play an important role, any religion for that matter, in promoting and deepening the democratic process in this world? Thank you.
Sure. Of course, you see, among Tibetan, majority of them Buddhist, or some small percentage Muslim, then a few Christians, and some non-believer. So, you see, different tradition, I mean, these different religion, different tradition, so different concept, I cannot say, so generalize. But as far as Buddhism is concerned, as I mentioned earlier, then furthermore, the monk's rule in Vinaya, about 100 precepts, no, not precepts, some kind of rule, or how to dismiss, how to accept, like that, about 100 rules. So all 100 must carry a group of monk, bhikshu, at least 5 bhikshus. Otherwise, it's no matter how sort of important, like me, one individual monk, you see, cannot carry this work. Only a group of monk. So the democratic sort of principle is there. Then also, you see, we fully committed about, you see, I think modernization, including democracy. I think I may mention over 400 years, about 400 years, Dalai Lama institution, you see, also take the both responsibility, temporal and spirituality. Since 5th Dalai Lama, this practice started. Since my childhood, I saw a lot of drawbacks with regent. Then, say, I develop conclusion. The power in few people's hand. So that's a mistake. So then, 1950, I took the responsibility, political responsibility. Then soon, I think around 1952, 53, I set up reform committee. So start some reform, but not very successful because of the circumstances. Then only after 59, when we reach India, at once I start some work more democratic way. Then 2001, we already achieved elected political leadership. then my position is a semi-retired position. Now 2011, I totally now retired. No political responsibility. So Lobsang Sangay elected political leadership. So as far as sort of political matter is concerned, he is my boss. Age-wise, much younger. But then, because of this system, elected sort of leader, so I must respect like that. However, the spiritual side, I'm his boss. Like that. So, my retirement, 2011, not only myself retired, but 4th century old tradition. Dalai Lama institution automatically become head of both temples as a spirituality. Now that formally, happily, voluntarily ended. So sometimes I jokingly say, telling my friend, if 5th Dalai Lama reappear, whether he agree or not, I doubt. But I have no worry. Now he never will come. Past is past.
Wonderful. Please, yes. Can we have the mic up here, please?
I think the question is, I think real sort of message of religions, truthful, honest, love. So love means respect other. So the democracy also, you see, very much connected with respect other and love other, sense of concern of others' well-being. The totalitarian dictators just think their own interest or small circle sort of interest. So lack of compassion, lack of tolerance. So all major religious tradition actually, you see, teach us love, compassion, forgiveness, tolerance. Like that. Okay.
Your Holiness, I'm Joseph Cheng, convener of the Alliance for True Democracy in Hong Kong. As you know so well, our struggle for democracy has encountered serious difficulties. We probably cannot expect significant progress in the foreseeable future, in the near future. In fact, we have not been able to deliver much, despite we have not been able to deliver much in terms of results, despite our efforts in the past 2-3 decades. Yet, we are not going to give up.
Oh, yes.
We are going to insist on our peaceful, non-violent civil disobedience campaigns. We would like to have some advice from you, and we also want to learn from Tibet. In what ways can we learn from your followers? Thank you very much.
That's difficult to sort of give suggestion. Very difficult, very complicated. But one thing I can share with you, no matter how difficult it is, keep your belief and your struggle. So eventually, you see, truth. Now I often, you see, expressing our struggle. Also, you see, a struggle between power of truth, power of gun. So for short term, power of gun is much more stronger. Long term, power of truth is more stronger. So please, you believe that and carry your work. Good. Sometimes I think important, you see, should not let too much emotion. Reason, believe with reason, and pursue calmly. That's important. That's my experience. What do you think? Oh, okay, good.
We'll try. We're going to take 2 more questions, one over here and then the gentleman standing over there. So right now, please, and and then we're going to hear from the Sikyong Lobsang Sangay in closing.
Your Holiness, I'm Selima Ahmed from Bangladesh Women Chamber of Commerce and Industry. You said about humanity, you said about respect to people. Why, in a democratic nation, we women face inequality, face violence, face harassment? So what is your advice to the government or the people of the democratic nation that why that happens? And your advice.
Female. Female.
Yeah.
Oh. I think here, I think long human sort of history, I believe. I think a few 100,000 years ago, I think we, humanity, very small sort of number, and mainly I think something like family basis. So no concept of leadership. All work together. Whatever they get, share together. Then gradually farming system start. The population increase. And then some mischievous people started. So then concept of leadership come. At that time, no rule of education. So in order to become leader, only physical strength. So male dominance then start. Even I think some religious tradition, that sort of society, the cultural heritage, male dominance, then some impact in even religious field. Then education develop. Education brings more equality. Now today, existing education just oriented about material value is not sufficient. Now we must make effort constantly, make known existing education field must include some method to educate warm-heartedness, not as a religious matter, but simply, strictly secular way. According to Indian understanding, secularism is respect all religions and also respect non-believer. So that's, I think, very relevant to today's world. Now, out of 7 billion, about 1 billion non-believer. And among the believers, a lot of different sort of traditions there. So India's 1,000-year-old sort of tradition, secular, respect all religion, and also non-believer. So that way, the secular ethics can be very fit in secular education. So therefore, but now time come, we must pay more attention about the promotion of human inner value, human love. In that respect, female should take more active role. So that's the reality. So the male dominance is outdated thinking. I think male need female, female need male. That's uncommon. Without combination, no longer human being. This is a fact. So we must realize or accept that reality should be equal. Use common sense.
Oh, His Holiness Dalai Lama, I have a simple question. What are the possibilities of Buddhist non-violence creating a favorable environment for democracy in China?
You introduce yourself.
I am Professor Gopal Iyer from Punjab University, Chandigarh, and presently with the Institute of Social Sciences, New Delhi.
I think You see, at Buddhist also now, I usually see telling any person, anyone who consider himself or herself as a Buddhist, then we should be 21st century Buddhist. That means Buddhist with fuller knowledge about Buddhism, Buddhist philosophy, Buddhist psychology. Many of us, many Tibetan, many Chinese Buddhists, and many others are Buddhist. You see, they consider themselves as a Buddhist, but they only know 3 words: Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. Do not know what is Buddha, how to develop, how to become Buddha. No knowledge. No pay attention. Study. So sometimes, according Buddhism and Jainism, Sankhyaism, one part of Sankhyaism, these 3 ancient Indian sort of spiritual tradition, no concept of creator, but self-creation. Buddha mentioned, you are your own master. Your future entirely depends on yourself, not on Buddha. So Buddha only show the situation or the reality. Then individual, you yourself, analyze, use common sense, and then improve yourself. So that's Buddhist way. So sometimes we Buddhists almost consider Buddha as a creator. So we are not making any effort or pray to Buddha, please give me happy future, happy future. Totally wrong. So therefore, now China, I think around 400 millions of Buddhists. Now the communist China, the biggest Buddhist population. So many of these Buddhists really showing interest about the Nalanda tradition. That's Tibetan Buddhism, Nalanda tradition. So Nalanda tradition, pay much sort of attention to it. Study. My own case, when I start a study, my age about 7, already start to memorize those root texts wrote by Nalanda master. Then at that time, I'm no interest about this study. So I study under fear. My tutor always keep some whip. So this, His Holiness Dalai Lama, you see, carry study under threat by my tutor. Out of fear, so I carry study. So memorize these root text. Then each word, each vocabulary, explain according commentary. Again, Nalanda masters. So usually, you see, 20, 30 years take for study. So that I think on this planet, we Tibetan, only Tibetan still preserve the rich knowledge about Nalanda tradition. Here, 3 parts. One part, science, about human emotion, human mind. That's we consider science, not religion. It's an academic subject. So, in front of you, may I say so, the Western psychology, modern psychology, compare ancient Indian psychology, particularly Buddhist psychology, your sort of say the standard of Kazara knowledge about psychology is like kindergarten. So these now many scientists number of scientists. Now over 30 years, we had sort of a serious discussion, dialogue. Now many of them realize information about emotion, about mind, and the whole system of emotion. You see, the information from Nagaland tradition is, they found very, very useful. So in order to develop inner peace, you see, fuller knowledge about the whole system of emotion is very essential. Buddhists usually use this for next life or nirvana. But we can use these things simply how to build happy society, peaceful society. As an academic subject, not a religious subject. Then Buddhist philosophy, Madhyamika philosophy, I think you heard, the Lungsu Pusa, Nagarjuna, or Nagarjuna's philosophy, very much similar, the quantum physics. Nothing exists by objectively. If we investigate thoroughly, there is no independent reality. That's exactly Lungsu Pusa, Nagarjuna stated that. So now, this philosophical view, confirmed by quantum physicists, like that. So, quite strange. But meantime, I never state Buddhism is best religion. I never state that. The best, or I mean good or bad, have to sort of have to define where. Defined on the basis of individual. Someone or find the concept of creator is very, very powerful. So, for that person, the Christianity or the theistic religion is much more useful, much better. Then some people, you see, non-theistic sort of religion, some people find that's much more effective. So, when we judge, when we cannot say this religion is best religion. But the philosophical field, yes, I can say Buddhist philosophy, particularly Nagaland tradition, very, very sophisticated. Like that. So, one lady.
Okay, one last
Now,
question.
last question now.
Last question. Thank you very much. I wanted to seize this opportunity of speaking to you. I am Shamama Arbab from Pakistan, Peshawar. My
Oh, Peshawar. Oh.
Shamama Arbab.
Then I think you should be like that.
One thing that most of the things my religion and my parents have been telling me never hit my head till I heard you and your sayings. You reinforced what our religion has been telling us about peace. Your way of expressing it was great. I just wanted to humbly state that. But my question is, you mentioned that we have to finish the distrust and mistrust in order to let the positive energies flow. We are facing this problem between Pakistan and India. People are very positive towards each other.
Yes.
But we do not see how can we let this positive energy, flow across. So do you have any suggestion for us? Pakistan and India.
I think quite right. You see, I notice, you see, people to people, particularly you see, people on the border area, you see, their sort of economy and some other things heavily interdependent. So some cases maybe even marriage, maybe. So I think the people sort of relation is very important. And one time I think when news come, one young child in Pakistan, some illness or something, then brought to India medical treatment. The many Indian, you see, take full care and show the friendship. So that I think we must go continuously. Then political leader, and including military personnel, you see, for the time being, some difficulties, I think for their own interest, sometimes, I think like former Soviet Union, you see, I think some extent now, today also now, something happened in Moscow. For their own short-term interest, you see, they deliberately create some negative other side. So here also, you see, some Indian, also you see, when they heard Pakistani, I think similar in Pakistan side also.
People love each other.
Then very good.
Problem solved.
I think majority, yes, I totally agree.
Problem
But I think because of propaganda, and then sometimes, you see, human emotion. You see, sometimes it's too much emotion, then no room of reason. So in any way, I think people to people should have sort of closer relation, just continuously. That's the only way. And then wait. I think leadership side, eventually, I think will change. Will change. And then, like this kind of conference, if we invite some hardliner, and then let them express, and we can argue gently, not like this. Through reason. That's the way to build trust. So, as I mentioned earlier, some hardliner, these Muslim terrorists, I prefer welcome and talk. I think outside should check very thoroughly. then come inside, then talk.
I think we've all seen why His Holiness the Dalai Lama is a symbol of democracy, of universalism, and a great inspiration not only to people in Asia, but in Africa, in the Middle East, in Russia, in Latin America, even in the kindergarten West. You are really an inspiration to us all. Thank you. And now it's my very, very great pleasure to call upon my good friend, the Sikyong, the elected political leader of the Central Tibetan Administration, Lobsang Sangay.
His Holiness Carl Gershman, George, and all the dignitaries and participants and experts and activists for world movement for democracy. It's a great privilege and honor to be here and to say a few words about the legendary George Fernandez being a true and rare friend of Tibet. Before that, I would just like to mention, because this is a conference on strengthening democracy in Asia, and I was put in a very difficult position when His Holiness mentioned that I was his political boss. As we all know, spirituality is more powerful than politics. Anyway, I have a term limit, and His Holiness is our leader for life. And also, actually, His Holiness just mentioned, in true sense of the word, His Holiness is a true democrat, because from the 5th Dalai Lama all the way to 14th Dalai Lama, all the Dalai Lamas have always been both the spiritual and political leader. And in 1959, when he came to India, he introduced democracy, and then we had our own parliamentary election in 1960. And in 1963, His Holiness felt that we need women representation in the parliament. So in 1963, we had women representation in the parliament, perhaps far ahead of even Western countries, including Switzerland, who had women representation only in 1970s. So all the way till 2001, we had democratic election. But also in 1963, a constitution was introduced in exile, because we had just lost our country and we've been in exile only for 4 years. But His Holiness introduced a constitution in which His Holiness mandated a provision which says that His Holiness the Dalai Lama could be impeached by the parliament. Now at that particular time, who would have thought of impeaching His Holiness the Dalai Lama? But His Holiness insisted that provision has to be in the constitution, because everybody has to be servant to the constitution, to the democracy, including His Holiness the Dalai Lama. There was a lot of resistance from the Tibetans, but still His Holiness insisted. And as His Holiness explained in 2001, he declared himself semi-retired and handed over major authority to the elected leader, Kalun Tripa. And in 2011, when His Holiness declared that he will fully retire from politics and he's going to separate the political authority from the spiritual authority, Tibetans were very nervous, and appeals and petitions from all over the world, including a special meeting was convened, where His Holiness was appealed again and again not to devolve his political authority, but we wanted him, and still want him, to continue as both the spiritual and political authority. But His Holiness again insisted the time has come for Tibetan people to take responsibility, and he separated the spiritual authority from political authority. Now in this day and age, where you see a lot of leaders resisting from giving up their power, that caused a lot of bloodshed around the world. We see it even now. But His Holiness is one of the very rare leaders who willingly, as he says, happily and magnanimously, if I add, gave up his political authority in 2011. And he showed an example to the leaders around the world that you can devolve your political authority and let people mature and embrace democracy. And in my humble position, I'm given the political responsibility, but like me, for 6 million Tibetans around the world, His Holiness is the most revered leader even today. And he is our revered boss all the time. And that applies to all the Buddhists around the world and all the democracy activists around the world. In that sense, His Holiness is a true democrat. And remembering legendary George Fernandez, he is also a democracy activist and also a great friend of Tibetan people. I think I'm quoting George Fernandez here. I'm not suggesting that you all do this. So when Tibet was occupied and His Holiness and 80,000 Tibetans had to flee from Tibet to India, so George Fernandez was in Mumbai. Then he was so agitated, he called some of his friends to go and submit a memorandum at the Chinese consulate in Mumbai. He called the consulate and said, we are coming here with a petition. Then finally, when the day came to submit the petition, from few people, it turned out to be 1,000 people who went to the Chinese consulate in Mumbai. But then when they reached there, the door, the windows, everything was shut. And then when he realized that the consulate will not be open, they're not going to accept the memorandum. So he shouted a few times, then he got the loudspeaker, shouted a few times. Then finally he thought, okay, he got this idea because he saw some officials sneaking out from the window. So he sent one of his friends to collect a lot of eggs and another friend to get a portrait of Mao Zedong. Now, I'm not recommending you do this. And then obviously they did what they had to do. And then the George Fernandez, the mentor, as we mentioned, Manohar Lohia, he said, that's a stupid mistake you made, George, for doing that. But then the Chinese government sent a protest letter to the Indian government saying, we have heard the sentiments of the Chinese people, so we need an unconditional apology from the Indian government. The Pandit Nehru at that time wrote back to Chow Enlai. He said, look, I am a Prime Minister of India, but we have a political party system. This George Fernandez and the political party is a different party, so I have no control over them. Chow Enlai wrote back and said, I don't give a damn about your political party system, but I want an unconditional apology. Otherwise, for 100 years, we will neither forgive and forget you. And that day, George Fernandez said, I had to take side, and I had to take the side of His Holiness Dalai Lama for good. So since that day, George Fernandez regarded himself as a true friend of His Holiness Dalai Lama and true friend of the Tibetan people. Now, I think there are many Tibetans in this room. On behalf of all the Tibetans, I can say he's not just a true but a rare friend. Whenever we are in trouble here in Delhi, we used to have plenty of troubles. When we were in Delhi College, we used to go to Chinese embassy near Chanakya police station. Then we used to land up in, as we know, all the activist places like prison, things like that. So we used to go to our trusted friend George, and then we always say, "Please help us." He was at times he was minister, at times he was member of parliament. Not only he used to listen to us, he always tells his secretary to write a note to the concerned authority. Not only write a note, then he calls himself whether he received the note, and Tibetans should be released. Then he will go himself personally get Tibetans released. At one time, Chinese Prime Minister was here. A lot of Tibetans were arrested. He himself went to the Supreme Court and appealed for the release of Tibetans. When Tibetans were released, he led the march next day. But then the difference, again, about George Fernandez Ji was that, again, he's rare. Because when he became the defense minister, his support for Tibetan people remained the same. So normally, once you're in an official position, once you're in government, they shy away a bit. But we could still approach him. He still came, despite a lot of debate within the government, he came to Tibetan events here in Majdunga Tila, Tibetan camp in Delhi. And he received His Holiness Dalai Lama. See, in that sense, he was a true friend. And at that time, he did make a controversial statement also. He said, Pakistan is not our adversary, but China is. And then he came under a lot of pressure within the government for saying that. But again, he did not shy away from saying all these things and doing what he actually believed. Now, he didn't do it out of sympathy for Tibetan people per se. He had sympathy for all the refugees and all the marginalized people around the world. He was similarly concerned with Tamils. In fact, the Burmese activists, as Carl mentioned, when we used to go to meet George Fernandez, Burmese activists were living in his official residence. So he was that engaged and involved as a person, as a leader. In that sense, he was also a true Democrat. And more than that, he really felt that Tibet was and is a core issue for India. He sincerely felt, and he strongly advocated, that after the invasion and occupation of Tibet, China came to the border of India, hence we have the longest border dispute between India and China. He sincerely felt that. He sincerely felt that Tibet was vital as an environment for whole of Asia, particularly for India. As we know, the 10 major rivers of Asia flow from Tibet. Indus and Satluj River from India, from Tibet to India to Pakistan. Brahmaputra River from Tibet to India to Bangladesh. Salween and Mekong River from Tibet all the way to Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, all the way to, we know, Vietnam. And Yangtze River and Yellow River. Yellow River, the cradle of Chinese civilization, start from Tibet. So Tibet is a major source of fresh water. And then there are some experts who say that before, wars were fought over land. Nowadays, wars are fought over energy. Soon, wars will be fought over water. And Tibet is the the origin of fresh water and 10 major rivers which provide fresh water for more than 1 billion people. And also Tibet is called the third pole. After Antarctica and Arctic, Tibet has the third highest reserve of ice. The difference being from Antarctica and Arctic, when they melt, it goes to ocean. But as far as Tibet ice is concerned, when they melt, it provides fresh water for all the major rivers. So hence, Tibet issue is not just the issue of 6 million Tibetans. Environmentally, it's an issue for whole of Asia and more than 1 billion people. And geopolitically, it's a major issue because you have the two largest populated countries in the whole world, China and India, facing each other over the border of Tibet. And spiritually, as His Holiness mentioned, Buddhism is one of the most ancient civilizations. And Tibetans can take pride in saying this, and His Holiness always says this, that the best preserved text and teaching of Buddha is in the Tibetan literature now. And India obviously is our guru because we learn Buddhism from India. But Tibetans take great pride in saying that we are the best chelas. And with, yes, disciples. And with His Holiness as our leader and as our teacher, you can clearly see we are the best disciple. So in that sense, George Fernandez truly believed the Tibet issue is not just the issue for Tibetans. It is the issue for India. It is the issue for Asia. It is the issue for the whole world. That's why he was committed till the end. In that sense, he was a true friend, a rare friend, much beloved, and he was a true democrat. People like him are very rare in this world. And today, I think it's a great and important occasion to remember him. And His Holiness Dalai Lama always says, always advises us, always keep your old friends and remember your old friends and make new friends. And George Fernandez will always be a friend of Tibetans, friends of refugees, a friend of marginalized people around the world, and friends of democracy activists around the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for these very beautiful words. And now may I invite Dr. Ash Narayan Roy, Director, Institute of Social Sciences, to give a vote of thanks, please.
His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Dr. Lobsang Sangay, Carl Gershman, Anselmo Lee, Melinda de Jesus, Dr. George Matthew, and very distinguished invitees and friends. My task this morning is far from easy. How does one thank someone like the Holiness, who is the embodiment of compassion, peace, and love, as well as a source of happiness for the millions? There is a character in Henrik Ibsen's immortal play, An Enemy of the People, and it says, "The strongest man is the one who stands alone." I think His Holiness is that man who, even Gandhiji told us to say no to something which is unacceptable. It is therefore not enough to say thank you. It is amazing how these two words that mean so much can seem so little. The simple phrase of thank you would pale and diminish in sheer enormity of gratitude we owe to His Holiness. We are greatly blessed by His graceful presence and message. We gratefully recall His visit to the Institute in 2010, which Dr. George Matthew alluded to. What a mesmerizing lecture that he gave. All along, it has been his limitless love and his concern for humanity that have guided institutions like ours. His Holiness' life and mission has been one of hope. I thank him for his kind presence and blessings. I must also say just 2-3 lines about Shri George Fernandez, who we know has all along remained a rebel against authority. A knight in shining armor would be the best way to describe him. In the 50s and 60s, he became a household name. He was able to galvanize mass workers, organize radical activism against the establishment. Today, because of his ill health, he may be forgotten by some, but his legacy stands tall. Thanks are due to Dr. Lobsang Sangay for his brilliant speech. I think he indeed deserves where he belongs today. Mr. Carl Gershwin is an old friend of the Institute. It is his vision and leadership that has brought NED to where it stands today. We are thankful for his support in organizing this conference. I wish to also express my profuse thanks to Mr. Anselmo Lee and Ms. Melinda de Jesus for their kind support. Let me just take 1 minute of you, since we are here to discuss strengthening democracy. Across Asia, we have the trappings of democracy: elections, parliament, separation of power. But many countries have institutions without authority. As Larry Diamond rightly says, advance of freedom across the world is swinging in the wrong direction. Maybe after the fiesta, the hangover. Democracy is in recession, he says. What is worrying is that this recession is visible in large democracies. Democracy is not about verbal fights or political grandstanding. It is about collaboration and deliberation. This is exactly what we are here. And I believe that it is not just a nudge and wink that will do. It will have to be much more proactive. I'm sure the deliberations over the next 2 days will provide a lot of answers and perhaps leave a lot of questions unanswered. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Roy. We will now break for a tea break for half an hour. And for all the participants who have not registered yet, there is a registration table outside.